So what is Bitcoin? That's the big question for this presentation. To understand a little bit more about Bitcoin, we first have to understand what money is. Money plays a lot of different roles in an economy. Probably the role you're most familiar with is that money acts as a medium of exchange. If you go back in time before money really existed, people would make trades, and people still do make trades, by exchanging things that they have to get things that they want. The problem with that process is you have to find someone who has something that you want, and you have to have something that they want. That's called a double coincidence of wants, and it can be a problem. If you have, say, bananas, and you are trying to get something other than bananas, let's say bread, and you find someone who has bread, but maybe it's rye bread and you don't like rye bread, and you find someone else who has bread and maybe it's a little bit moldy and you don't want moldy bread, and then you find a third person and they don't have bread at all. It can take a while before you find someone who has exactly what you want, and they also have to want what you have, in this case, bananas. So that whole process can take a lot of time, it can take a lot of effort, and in the meantime, there can be a lot of trades that do not get engaged in simply because you have this double coincidence of wants problems. Well, money steps in and fixes that problem, because instead of trading goods for goods, you can trade goods for money that can be then used to go buy other kinds of goods. Money itself, though, is not always, has not always been the same for all kinds of people. The first kinds of money are known as commodity money. And in different parts of the world and in different times in history, we've seen that people use different kinds of things as money. In the picture that you see here, there's all kinds of different things that people have used as money. People have used corn, people have used salts, people have used coffee and rocks and oil, and people have, of course, used gold and silver and other kinds of precious metals. These are what we call commodity money. When the money that is used is valuable because of what it is, because of some underlying intrinsic value to the good itself. And that's fine, but it can be difficult to justify the validity of these things. It can be that certain rocks are good for money and certain rocks aren't acceptable as money. And you can counterfeit some of those precious metals. Additionally, controlling the supply of these things can be really tough. So most countries around the world have adopted what's called fiat money. Fiat money is that paper money that you're used to seeing, that you probably have in your pocket or in your, somewhere in your house. So those cash and the coins that we use for money, that's fiat money, and fiat money is issued by governments, and governments try to control the supply of that money. Another role that money plays is as a unit of account. As you see here, you've got a whole bunch of fruit in a fruit stand, and you've got some price tags on those items, and that's a good thing, because if you went to the fruit stand and nobody really had a common frame of reference upon which to base transactions, it would be really difficult to say, to price products. It would be much more difficult to engage in transactions, and you might just go back to that barter type of economy. But with prices and with money, we are all able to talk about things in sort of a similar context. And if you say, well, grapes are expensive today, we understand that you don't want to pay the price, and the price is given in terms of a dollar value. And so that can help exchanges to happen more conveniently. Money also acts as a store of value, so that as long as the money maintains value, in other words, there's not a lot of inflation, then you can put aside your money for some later date. You don't have to spend it immediately. It can hold its value over time, and that's something that's very important if you want to have an economy where people save and consequently where investments can take place. So those are our three roles that money plays. It acts as a medium of exchange, it acts as a unit of account, and it acts as a store of value. Now, another thing about money is that not everything works well as money. If we go back to our first slide here on the commodity money, some of these things work better as money than others. Rocks can be used as money, stones and shells and those kinds of things can be used as money, but they may not be the best kind of money. Bushels of wheat or bushels of corn may not be the best form of money. Certainly barrels of oil can be a problem if you use them as money. So what makes a better kind of money than something else? What makes something more likely to be used as money? Well, one thing is that money should have the characteristic of being portable. It should be easy to move it around. So you can stuff it in a suitcase, or more likely stuff it in your wallet and carry it around. And that's a good thing in terms of money. You don't want things that are too big and too heavy. In this case, we have a man on the Isle of Yap. And one of the things about the Isle of Yap that's in the South Pacific is that they use these giant stones as money. The problem with these giant stones is they're not very portable. And so if you were to kind of chip the stone apart to make it more portable, you'd decrease the value of it tremendously. So folks in the Isle of Yap use these sort of as for large exchanges, and the stone really doesn't move all that often. But this stone does have one of the characteristics of money that's important, and that is that it's quite durable. You want your money to be durable. I mean, think about what we use as money today. We use paper money, but we don't use tissue paper money. The paper that we use is instead more of a fiber that can hold up to a lot of abuse. So we want our money to be durable. We want it to be recognizable. You see, this $100 bill here isn't going to get me very far because people look at it and they immediately recognize it as monopoly money. You want your money to be recognizable so that it can be accepted by people at a variety of places without having to go through a thorough examination as to whether or not the money is legitimate or not. And then finally, you want your money to be easily divisible. If you have, like that stone on the Isle of Yap, it's very difficult to conduct smaller exchanges because you can't really divide it up. But in most fiat currencies, we have bills, maybe we have dollars, and then we can break it down into quarters and nickels and dimes and pennies. We can break the money up, and so we can conduct smaller transactions with our money. So these are our four characteristics that make good money: portability, durability, recognizability, and easily divisible. And fiat currency usually fits all of these characteristics. It's not that nothing else does. If you've ever seen prison movies, you've probably seen folks exchanging cigarettes. Cigarettes have most of these characteristics. They're portable, they're recognizable, they're really easily divisible. You can break them into cartons and packs and individual cigarettes. They're not incredibly durable. They can certainly come apart, but they do have most of the characteristics for what people need to exchange, to act as a kind of currency. Now, the third area of money that we want to talk about here is what makes money valuable. There are really three things. Of course, scarcity is really important. If money grew on trees like it does in this picture, then the money's not really worth anything. I mean, think about the fall when the leaves are falling off the trees and we just rake the leaves up and burn them, or blow them into the woods. If money was as prevalent as the leaves on the trees, then it really would be just as valuable as the leaves on the trees. The only way a money tree is good is if you're the only one who has one. So we want money to be scarce. Now, money can also be valuable because government says that it's valuable. If you look at a dollar bill, on those dollar bills, you'll see that a statement that says this is good for all debts, public and private. And why? Because the government says that it's good. But just because the government says that it's good for money, and even though it can be scarce, those two things don't necessarily make money valuable. The most important thing that makes money valuable is your belief that money is valuable. Really, money is just paper with people's faces on it and pictures, usually some kind of patriotic symbol. In this case, we have a picture of the ruble, the Russian currency. And a lot of places around the world look at the Russian currency and say, I'm not really sure I want that. I know your government says that it's valuable, and I know that it's scarce, but I'm not sure that I want that. I'm not sure that it's going to maintain its value. In fact, there are parts of Russia in which the currency isn't valuable. In fact, there's an area in Siberia, parts of Siberia, where people are regularly paid in rubles, but they don't want to be paid in rubles. They want to be paid in something that has value, that people will accept because they believe it has value. And in a lot of cases, that thing is vodka. There was a situation a few years ago, a number of years ago now, where teachers were not being paid by the local government, and they were starting to get a little bit irritated by this, and the local government offered to pay them in rubles, and they refused. They said, no, we want to be paid in toilet paper and vodka, which just goes to show you that no matter what the government says about the value of currency, people have to believe that it has value. Otherwise, they would prefer to have other things, and that can lead you back to a barter economy, which is not incredibly efficient. So, with that background, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin. Bitcoin seems to have the characteristics of money. It seems to have the characteristics of portability. It's a digital currency, so you can move it. Actually, it doesn't move. It sort of stays in one place, and you can move and access it rather easily. So it's relatively portable. It's really durable because it's a digital currency. It's not going to wear out. It is certainly easy to divide. It's just a digital number, so you can break it down into smaller units to be sure. And it's recognizable, at least in most places. This is probably the biggest concern for Bitcoin because you don't really ever have the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is not a physical thing, it's a digital thing. So if you can find a way to counterfeit Bitcoin, it's going to be very difficult for people to say, well, that's not really Bitcoin because they don't see it. They see that you have a number in an account somewhere. So there might be a little bit of trouble in that sense of the word, or in that sense of the of whether this is good money. Also, it's sort of it's a kind of currency that whoever has possession of it can spend it. So if your account gets hacked, there's no Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. There's no bank regulator who says that, yeah, this was yours and we're going to make you whole, because Bitcoin is decentralized. It simply means that there is no central authority that issues the Bitcoin. If we go back in time to when Bitcoin originated, Bitcoin is supposedly originated at least the concept originated in 2007 with a person or persons known as Satoshi Nakamoto, who began working on this Bitcoin concept and trying to create a digital currency over which there could be some amount of control to limit how much of it was available, so that there would not be inflation. Nakamoto is on record as living in Japan, but no one has really pinned down who this individual is or who this collective of individuals might be. So it's sort of a mysterious origin for Bitcoin, but the concept has really taken off, and Bitcoin is used fairly widely on the internet. It is a great kind of currency if you want to engage in illicit activities, because once again, it is very difficult to track, and it is not controlled by any government. As far as sustainability is concerned, in other words, can Bitcoin persist? Can somebody named Nakamoto come up with their own currency and have it be viable? Well, let's talk a little bit about where Bitcoins come from. Bitcoins are mined, and they're mined in the sense that you might mine gold or silver, but you don't use a pick or a shovel. One of the ways that you can earn Bitcoins is by being a miner. A miner verifies transactions of Bitcoins in something called a blockchain. What that means is that a whole bunch of transactions come through your computer, and you need to verify that the transactions are valid, that the Bitcoins actually exist, and that they can be transferred to somebody else. If you verify enough transactions, then you can start earning Bitcoins. Currently, however, the number of Bitcoins available is capped at around 21 million. The creation rate, sort of part of the process of mining Bitcoins, part of the computer code that's used to generate these Bitcoins has built in sort of a fail-safe to keep there from being too many Bitcoins in creation, so that the creation rate of Bitcoins is halved every so often to make the mining of new Bitcoins more rare. In so doing, you can control the supply of how many Bitcoins are available. As more people start to accept Bitcoins, though, this becomes a big problem. So as different companies are accepting Bitcoins, Starbucks, you can use Bitcoins to buy your lattes. Home Depot has accepted Bitcoins, and other companies have accepted Bitcoins as currency. As more and more people do that, that means that there needs to be more and more verification of the use of Bitcoin. So the blockchains get larger and larger. The problem is that processing those blockchains takes a lot of time. So there are now some competing interests in the Bitcoin world who are competing over whether or not the block sizes should increase so that there can be more transactions. This is sometimes referred to in information security or information economics in general as a fork. So you've got a software or some sort of a procedure that's going along in a nice straight line, and then you reach a decision point where people can go to the left or to the right, like a fork in the road. And the issue is which direction that fork will take us. Is it a situation where we're going to see that we increase the size of the blocks? In other words, we're going to allow more Bitcoins, or are we going to go in the sort of stay in the same direction so that the number of Bitcoin will not increase? And this is a question that needs to be addressed. And if you're going to have a viable monetary system, one of the things that you have to have is enough currency in order to facilitate the exchanges that people want to engage in. Another problem for Bitcoin, and this is kind of endemic in the whole idea of this cyber currency, is these wild price fluctuations. So when Bitcoins first came out in 2009, most people didn't want them. You could get Bitcoins for like 75 cents. And you can see there in the prices of Bitcoins that over time, as we move along this axis here, the variation in the price of Bitcoins, there's just a little bit of a blurb, a little bit of an uptick here in mid-2011, and then it goes back down. It just kind of hangs out near this zero line. You see this big wild swing here in the early 2013 where Bitcoin jumps up over $250, and then it drops back down, and then we see this massive swing up in early 2014 where Bitcoins go over $1,100. And then we see a big drop off, and we see ups and downs and ups and downs. These changes, these fluctuations occur as people speculate in Bitcoins, as companies adopt Bitcoin and are willing to accept it as a currency. We just see these massive changes over time, and that can be very destabilizing for a currency market. Not only that, there are significant security issues when it comes to Bitcoin. Because it's digital, because it's basically bits of information, they can be stolen. And in this case, it's even easier than stealing real money. You don't have to break into a bank. You just have to break into somebody's account. There have been a ton of security breaches, and here are just a few of some of the bigger ones. Mt. Gox, which was a sort of a repository of Bitcoins, was hacked, and it drove the price of Bitcoins down from $32 to just pennies by initiating massive sell orders. This is what the hackers did. They said, hey, we're going to have lots of sales. Now, the problem for the hackers, or at least the hope for the hackers, was that when the price went down, they could just gobble up a whole bunch of Bitcoins at really low prices. But there were some fail safes that were put in place through Mt. Gox that prevented them from doing this. So really all it did was to drive the price down. A Bitcoin savings and trust was unmasked as a Bitcoin Ponzi scheme. So hey, you got Ponzi schemes with real money, you can have Ponzi schemes with Bitcoin. Mt. Gox 2 occurred when the site was just hacked so badly that it closed and nearly $300 million was lost. Hackers basically just stole all the money out of all the vaults. And somebody actually committed suicide as a result of this, one of the people who ran Mt. Gox. Then you have things like Flexcoin and Polonese and BitCurrix and Canadian Bitcoins. These are all exchanges that lost many, many, many Bitcoins. They didn't entirely shut down, but they did close as a result of, they did experience significant hacks and lost a lot of Bitcoins. And Bitstamp was social engineered so that basically employees allowed hackers into the system, and over $5 million was stolen. So social engineering becomes an issue here as you start to try to use tools and information to get people to give up their accounts. The point here is that a digital currency can be stolen more easily than a physical currency. As I mentioned, these are situations where we just have these very obvious, easy targets when you're just stealing data. And in this case, the data represents money. And you still have the same problems that normal money has, whether it's counterfeiting, whether it is whether or not people accept it as currency. And so you still have to deal with those kinds of things as well.